and other profiling. Oh, there we go. I was waiting for my announcement. This is the subcommittee on racial and other profiling disparities. I'd like to call this subcommittee meeting to order. It is Monday, January 24th, 6 p.m. And I'd like to begin just by first going over covering our sort of standard, just wait for one more subcommittee member who's joining us. Task Force Member Blaylark, welcome. We're just getting started, just called the meeting to order. I'd like to acknowledge that we have Councilmember Shaw and we have Deputy Chief Schuessler joining us today. I'd like to begin by going over our discussion agreements and reviewing those, and doing a quick review of our agenda. And we will also approve the meeting minutes from last meeting and move right into our agenda. So first, our discussion agreements. We've all seen these before, but I'll just go over them real quickly. Speak for yourself about what has heart in meeting. Honor the agenda or modify by agreement. Learn from and understand each other's perspective. Be respectful, candid, and constructive. Provide a balance of speaking time. Test assumptions by asking questions. Explore innovative solutions based on common interests. Strive to resolve differences and seek common ground. Discuss topics together rather than in isolation, and limit side conversations and actively participate. So those are our discussion agreements. Would anyone like to alter or add any agreement? Okay, I see heads shaking. That's great. I will also, rather than do a by name roll call, I'll just do a visual acknowledgement of who is present from our task force. I see Task Force Member Rivera, although the name is listed as Blanchard, that is Cynthia Rivera there. I see Task Force Member Battles. I see Task Force Member Horton. Can you hear us or acknowledge that you can hear me? Just acknowledge your presence. We're not on camera. Okay, did we just lose them? Task Force Member Blaylark. Also off camera. And Task Force Chairperson Krigler. I see you. Okay, hopefully our other members can hear us and are present and are not experiencing any technical issues. I'd like to move to approve, review and approve the meeting minutes. You all had those distributed to you via email, and hopefully you've had a chance to look over those. I'd like someone to make a motion to approve those if they find them satisfactory.
So move.
Can we get a second? Okay. All in favor, say aye or raise hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All right, I hear, I think almost all ayes. Thank you all. The meeting minutes are approved. Great. I'd like to get into our agenda. I'd like to point out though that I believe the meeting objectives on the agenda were from the last meeting. Those should have been updated. But I can tell you all that the goals of this subcommittee are to review our three guiding questions that emerged from our discussion last week. And those are in the form the different sections of the agenda. The first question is, how can we acknowledge that racial profiling has existed for a long time and learn from what has attempted to be done about it in the past. The second theme that emerged from our conversation was how is Elgin Police Department currently measuring and tracking racial profiling? And the third was, what steps can Elgin Police Department take to reduce and eliminate racial profiling? So we're going to in turn address each of these questions. Will begin to form or have begun to form the working agenda for this subcommittee. And we're going to in turn address them. Also would like to point out that a number of materials have been shared with you all via email and via the box folder. And what I would like to do today is to review vis-a-vis question 2, how is Elgin Police Department currently tracking and measuring racial profiling? And question 3, what types of steps can EPD take to reduce and eliminate profiling? Review the materials that we have that pertain to those 2 questions today as a way to get us moving on the path of generating. Our ultimate goal is to generate recommendations related to reducing racial and other profiling disparities. The first question about acknowledging that racial profiling has existed for a long time. We heard some commentary on that. Unfortunately, I don't have the material that I had hoped to have for us today, which is from the meeting minutes from the Human Relations Commission. That's going to take me a little more time to get. But we have plenty of other material to talk about and to get us to build a foundation for knowledge on this issue and to help generate ideas. So that's our agenda, and I have, I'm going to share my screen. Just a moment here. So I created some slides today. Hopefully you all are looking at my slide, just a title slide. And what I'd like to do is to go through, as I just highlighted, the guiding questions for the subcommittee. And each agenda will have all 3 questions on it, and you all were free to tackle whatever questions we want as a subcommittee. But this helps keep us focused on our task at hand. The 2 highlighted are the ones that I'd like to be discussing today. So the roadmap for what I'm going to be discussing, how Elgin Police Department currently tracks and measures profiling. We heard from Chief Lally last time about one resource, and in the time since the meeting, she has also shared a link to another resource, which I'll be talking about. And again, I'd like to invite Deputy Schuessler to comment on anything or provide context or add to anything that I'm sharing here today. We also heard Chief Lally mention the Elgin Police Department Transparency site, which has information on all stops. And then I'm adding to this portion discussion about the Elgin Police Department policy on impartial policing. There is an explicit policy on that. And since part of the charge of this group is to review existing policy, I want to just make sure we're checking that box and we're looking at that policy as part of an agenda item. So the first item is the data from the Illinois Traffic and Pedestrian Stop Study. This data is from is compiled by the Illinois Department of Transportation. So all jurisdictions, police jurisdictions have to report on their policing stops and provide the data from which this comes. And so I just went into the tables, table that is for Elgin, that Elgin reported. So you'll see, I don't know if anyone has come off mute recently, we're hearing some background noise. Sheila, I don't know if you can mute the person. Actually, there we go. I think I got it. So this data is from 2020. The 2021 data, as I understand it, is not available yet, but this is what we have. And you see there, it shows in the first panel, it collects data on these different types of stops or interactions. So, whoops, shoot, need to go back. So this is stops in the vehicle, traffic stops. And so this has the rate. And what we need to key in on here to make sure we're looking at disparities is this rate ratio versus white. And so you see there, because everything is being compared to the ratio for white, white is 1, okay? Everything else is going to be a factor of that. And so you see here, African-Americans with the number of stops, 7.8 times more likely to be stopped than whites in Elgin. Latinos, 3.1 times more likely. Asian, less likely at 0.58. American Indian and Alaska Native at 4.5. And Native Hawaiian, very high. Looks like there's a small number of Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islanders, but a number were stopped in Elgin. And so this is at least one data point that the police department has to report on and gather. And we can see there, in fact, this report highlights, I believe, the bolded numbers here for African Americans, Hispanic or Latino, and the other categories are bolded because they are a disparity, essentially, much higher. There's a lot of other useful contextual data here. Reason for stop here as well in these columns. So in panel 2, you see moving violation, equipment, license registration, or something pertaining to a commercial vehicle. The panel 3, this set of data comes up a lot in how folks are studying racial disparities in stops. So there's 2 contextual pieces of information that from the literature, it seems are very important. The first is the reason for the stop, which is kind of what this panel 2 is about. And on the other side, it's what happened, what was the outcome of the stop? Was there a verbal warning, a written warning, a citation, or something else of that nature? And so just to point out here as the outcome side, very interesting statistic here where you see African Americans having less likelihood of citation as an outcome than whites, slightly less for Latinos, and close to African Americans for Asians and so on. So that data is there. I want to draw your attention to it. It's the data we have at this time. The rest of the panel here is other types of stops, other aspects of a stop. So panel 5, I know there's a lot on this table, shows summary of driver or passenger search events. So this is pertaining to searches. And again, this is the row here to focus on. Sorry, I keep clicking on that. So when there was a search, this ratio is about to what the likelihood of whether contraband was found, right? For the other races relative to whites. And then we know dog sniffing has come up as an area of interest at one point for this committee, task force. And here's the data pertaining, the 2020 data pertaining to that as well. And the extent and the likelihood of contraband being found. I can go into some detail about the kind of how this statistic is calculated. It's benchmarked here. If you see this benchmark, right? So it's includes part of this area of Cook County and King County. And so the population here, when you see benchmark, this is the population of mostly King, as you can see there. Okay. Welcome, Councilmember Powell. I just admitted Councilmember Powell there. So, this is the data. Are there any questions about that? The Elgin expects to have quite a bit more in-depth data coming out of the study that's currently underway for the Center for Policing Equity. And our understanding is that data will be available later this month. That should also shed light and maybe give us other context for this kind of data. Just pausing there. Any questions? These tables are in the box folder, the full document. I also included a note that tells you exactly the page numbers that these are on, so you don't have to, so you can find it more easily in the box folder for you all. All right, moving on. As I mentioned, in this portion where I was talking about a little bit of background on what Elgin Police Department is currently doing to track and measure racial profiling, I believe I mentioned that it would be good to also have a look at the policy. I'm going to just click on this for a moment and pull up the actual document so that it's a little bit easier for us to read. Can you all see this on screen? I know it's a bit complicated, sort of a bit messy with my browser window, but this is the actual policy that pertains to impartial policing, effective February 2004, revised last August. So this has been updated recently. Discriminatory profiling, 111.1. And so as the policies typically do, have a purpose, a policy statement. The purpose of this policy is to establish guidelines and procedures regarding the department's commitment to unbiased, equitable treatment of all persons while enforcing the law and providing police services. And then there's a more general statement about the policy that says it is the policy of the Elgin Police Department to commit to the philosophy of community-oriented policing to address crime, perception of crime, and quality of life issues. In doing so, the department prohibits the practice of discriminatory profiling and ensures fair and bias-free treatment of all citizens during the performance of police services and while undertaking enforcement actions. Okay, so that is the statement. I'm going to scroll down to the specific portion around fair and impartial treatment, and that is here. I'm highlighting it. And here's where it breaks it down for the officers to be able to interpret and put it into practice. Okay, discriminatory profiling of individuals is strictly prohibited by members of the Elgin Police Department. Personnel shall take equivalent enforcement actions and provide bias-free services to all people in the same or similar circumstances. This does not mean that all people in the same or similar circumstances must be treated identically. Reasonable accommodations may be and sometimes should be made. Personnel may only consider specified characteristics when credible, verified, and timely. Intelligence relevant to the locality that links a person or people with specified characteristics to a particular unlawful incident or to a particular unlawful incidents or criminal patterns. Restrictions on the use of specified characteristics do not apply when law enforcement activities are designed to strengthen the department's relationship with diverse communities. And then it goes on to specify compliance, traffic stop reporting requirements. This is, this section here is where that data comes from in that table, right? Officers are completing that Illinois Department of Transportation traffic stop data sheet after each stop. That's the source of that data. So that's a part of the policy as well. Goes in to talk about pedestrian stop. There's a separate set of tables related to pedestrian stops. In the interest of time, I didn't present those, but they're there as well because we know that people can be stopped just walking down the street as well, not just in their vehicles. It specifies the training related to this policy. You see there that all officers are required to receive academy. Apologies, trying to highlight it here. Academy training with regard to bias policing issues, legal aspects in conformance with the Illinois Police Training Act, and will receive updated training as applicable. Section B, newly hired officers are also receiving training on issues of discriminatory profiling and bias awareness as part of their employee orientation. And then fair and impartial police training shall be designated for all personnel as determined by the chief of police in the training division. Supervisors are educated on how bias might influence their own operational or managerial decisions as well. And there's a link in the policy to where that training material is. I encourage you all to click on that link. So in this material that I'm sharing with you all today, hopefully we've had a peek into it, both that table and this policy. And then I'm going to go on to talk more about some of the other material. Really would like for all of you to make sure you are having a look with a critical eye at these materials and asking questions of them as need be, or using them to help us frame our thinking about recommendations.
Joe, when you talk about policies, but let's deal with the core value. What's happening when you set up specifically on Dundee and on Summit, when you're setting up, and the Elgin police have done this, and I don't know when they're going to do it next time. When you're setting up what they call to see if your license is legitimate, and also if your data is specific, is your registration. When you do that, you are impacting mostly minority areas when you set up those particular screening in those areas. And also they have done it on Dundee, on Lawrence and McClear. They have done it. I don't see them doing that anywhere else in the community, unless I'm wrong. And Deputy Chief can answer that. What is that for? I know they're checking for seatbelt, they're checking for a license, and they're checking for, and basically in predominantly minority areas, brown and black areas that they set these up. So what is that pretext? That's a pretext for something. We can talk about policy, but let's talk about what's actually happening.
Joe, if you'd like, I'd like to
Sure. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir. So what you were discussing there was something that had been done in the past. I don't think we've done what's called a roadside safety check in about 4 or 5 years now.
No, you did done in 2019 on McClure right in my neighborhood. You done it in 2019. Hold on a second. You done it in 2019, and on the four-way stop sign here in McClure, and at the beginning of 2019, you did it.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two things we're going to talk about then. We're going to talk about the roadside safety check, where we're pulling every 6th or 7th car into a lot, checking for seatbelts, checking for license and insurance, and then getting the motorist on their way without ever running anything if they have everything that they're supposed to have. I don't think we've done one of those in 4 or 5 years. I can get back to the committee on that and answer definitively when's the last time we did that one. The second one you're talking about, McClure, is also done through the Illinois Department of Transportation through the grants that we receive. And those are seatbelt checks. So at that point, we are sitting at 4-way stops, at 2-way stops, intersections, and we're looking specifically for the drivers and passengers to be wearing seatbelts. If you're wearing your seatbelt, you drive through without being stopped. If you're not wearing a seatbelt, you're flagged over by the officer, and then you're advised of the initiative that was occurring or is occurring, and you're subject to receiving a citation for that. Yes. So those do still occur. And we do, as far as where we try to do those, we do those throughout the entire city. The last one I did before becoming commander, I think I did on Lyle. So we do try to get intersections where we see heavy volume vehicles, and are also in a place where we're able to identify people coming up to the stop, not wearing seatbelts, and pull them over safely and not cause a lot of congestion with traffic.
Task Force Member Rivera has her hand up. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, that was part of my question too. Like, what determines the location of these stops? Like Randall and Bowes is a very busy intersection in Elgin as well, but what factors are included to determine the location of these procedures that you guys do, the stops?
Yeah, so with the seatbelt enforcement, usually that's where we're seeing our highest level of infractions. So we're identifying areas where we're seeing that frequently observed. We also, traffic is one of the largest complaints that we receive as a department, as far as what the community talked to us about. So we try to do visible enforcement in areas where we're receiving those type of complaints. For example, on Lyle, we may not necessarily have a huge issue with seatbelts right there, but we might have received a lot of complaints about speeding there. So we take that opportunity then to do that enforcement and be visible in that area to also address a secondary issue.
I would like to also respond to Task Force Member Blaylock, your question about, which I think is a crucial one, what is actually happening on the ground. And that is part of why I wanted to put the policy up here, because I think where we as a subcommittee, we as a task force see, feel, or sense a difference in what we experience between what we experience and what the policy says, that is a kind of line of inquiry that we want to open up with EPD and ask these kinds of questions. So I think, Walter, I'm going to keep your question as one that is a sort of sub-question for us related to the policy recommendations moving forward. What is actually happening on the ground related to this? Go ahead, Chair Krigler.
Yeah, I've also seen those check stops, like later in the evening, up around McLean and Fleetwood Drive up there, when up there by ECC, and it's a little club up there. I know that is frequent by largely amounts of African Americans and I think a shorter amount of Hispanics, but I know I've seen them up there, and we actually went through one maybe a couple years ago, and I guess they could tell we didn't come from the bar, so they didn't stop us. And so with that, I can see the thing of maybe checking for alcohol, that type of thing. But still, as of yet, it just seems like there are these catch-all type of things that is questionable of why these things are really happening. I don't know if there's a certain thing that's been happening, like a lot of DUIs or whatever in that area, but I do know I have seen them up in that area before. So.
If I'm allowed to speak to the roadside safety checks. So there's a lot of things that go into a roadside safety check. A lot of times they're done in conjunction with the state police. And again, it's a definitive number, like every sixth car, every eighth car. And that number usually is dependent upon how many people you have working that particular detail. And then also there's set times where we're able to do that per the grants that we receive. So I know with the seatbelt details, we can do those starting at like 3 or noon 1, 3 to 5. We try to do those around shift changes. And then with some of our DUI details that we do in conjunction with holiday weekends, those are usually like you can't start before 9 and you have to be done by 5. So I can get those actual times for you as well. But there's a whole host of rules and responsibilities that we have with the DUI details that we do that are sponsored through grants. But previously, when we did do the roadside safety checks, those were very, very organized. And there was rules like, for example, you drive in, your seatbelt's on, you hand your license and your insurance to the officer. There's no smell of alcohol, there's no impairment, and you drive out. You don't get your license ran. You don't get your insurance checked. You're on your way.
Councilmember Powell, before I go to you, I see your hand up. I just have a follow-up question to Deputy Chief for that. How much, when you say they're done in partnership with another agency or jurisdiction, how much leeway do you have to it related to the question Task Force Member Rivera asked earlier, like location or any of the other factors? In when and where to do those?
Yeah, so anecdotally, I can tell you from my experience as an officer when I was doing them, there was a concerted effort to spread them out throughout the city, not just pick any particular area and stick with a particular area. I remember doing them in the Kibble Street Bridge because we could pull people into the old library lot and get people safely off the roadway. I do remember ones being done at the CVS, like Mr. Blaylark said. Absolutely. I remember doing these on Larkin. So they were anecdotally, I can tell you throughout. I can see what information I can get from our traffic unit if we have anything historically archived, and kind of show you how we tried to spread them out throughout the city when we did do them.
That would be helpful. I'll follow up with you on that. Councilmember Powell. And then, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I think I'm on mute. Oh, I'm not on mute. Thanks, Deputy Chief Schuessler, because that was actually one of the questions I was going to pose. If we can get a list of some of the locations or a list of the locations where we have recently conducted those checks, because if people are concerned about whether the checks are being isolated into certain areas that are predominantly minority or low income. That's something we would like to see. I know I see them a lot in my area. Again, like I live in the College Green subdivision, and I know that when those checks were taking place, or if they're still taking place in terms of, I know with the grant funded ones for during looking for DUIs, the location right in front of the Elgin Township building is pretty popular, again, because right there off of McLean, you can pull people into that parking lot and get people in and off of the roadway safely. But I would definitely be interested, and I think it would help to be able to share that information in terms of where those safety checks are being located with this group. One of the things, and I'm not, and my apologies, I got off work late. I wasn't sure if there was any discussion around some of the articles that I believe that are in box. I had sent something to our facilitation team a while back regarding a law that the city of Philadelphia put in place recently. They're the first, recently became the first major city to ban minor traffic stops in an effort to promote equity and curb negative interactions with the police and racial profiling issues. It's something I really want us, I think it would behoove us to look at what Philadelphia is doing. What they did was they banned just minor traffic stops for, you've got a tail light out. It doesn't prohibit police officers from dealing with major safety issues, but some of these minor issues that could, and in some cases have been used to profile folks. This is what the city of Philadelphia has done, and I think it's something I'm personally very interested in us looking at here. So I just wanted to bring that up to the task force and bring that up to our facilitation team as something that I think would be helpful for us to get some more information on, to look into in terms of concrete policy issues that this group can potentially move forward.
Thanks, council member. I do remember you sharing that. I think it got into our general box and didn't get into the specific subcommittee box, but I'll make sure that we have that shared with this group. I do have one resource. So I don't know what point you joined. You heard about kind of the outline for the whole session today, but I do have one resource I'm going to talk about that is currently in box, where not necessarily eliminating stops, but reducing stops was one of the recommendations. But obviously, City of Philadelphia has gone so far as to ban it, which is definitely something we should look at. So I'll make sure this group gets it.
And then one other quick follow-up for Deputy Chief Schuessler. When or if an officer is found to be in violation of the policy, can you kind of walk us through what the consequences are for that officer? What is the accountability?
Yeah, so if an officer is found in violation of this will become an internal investigation. If it's reported from a citizen, obviously, because it has that racial component, it would go to our outside legal firm that the city has retained. And again, it depends on the history. If there's an issue with the officer, it depends on the severity of the offense. It depends on a lot of factors. But it would, whether it's we identifying it, whether again in our policy, it's not only incumbent upon the person not to do this, but it's incumbent upon other officers, if they observe it, to report it. So whether it's an internal investigation that's created, or it's through a citizen complaint that's investigated, it would be sent to our legal firm and then investigated. And when the findings there, then we would progressively deal with the issue.
Okay, thank you for the answer. I'll just say that this is just one of those issues that, and I think this is why this came up as an important subcommittee topic. It's easy to try to explain away behavior, and explain it away in a manner that is inconsistent with what folks in the community are actually feeling and experiencing. So I think we really need to look deeply at what policies and accountability and how we're evaluating, complaints or looking at stops that people make and looking at the history of stops with maybe particular officers that may have a pattern. Those are some of the things I think when I say we need to look a little bit deeper, because I believe it happens more often than what we think, but it's hard to prove, or in some cases it's being made hard to prove. And I don't think, I think that's one of the reasons why we're here, that we want to try to solve those problems and make sure that we're not having some of our residents be subject to being profiled.
No, understandable. And obviously, one of the things we have is an early warning system. So if we do have an officer who would be getting inordinate amount of complaints or even internal complaints of a specific type, that would be something that would be part of that early warning system that would be triggered, and then having us take a deeper dive. Obviously, the body worn cameras and our in-car cameras that we've had for nearly my entire career with audio capabilities also are some of the things that we have. And to your point, we do the random audits of the body worn cameras on every shift, every division, every month. So we're being proactive and making sure that officers are being professional and doing their job within policy. But point taken.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councilmember Powell. I'd like to move on to, we got a couple members with their hands up. Did you have anything else?
Nope.
Okay. Task Force Member Blaylock.
Yes. Now, Deputy Chief, are you saying that you don't do those stops anymore that you used to do? And this is not, this is, what I used to set up on Dundee and the CVS. Everybody who came through there, they would ask for their. It was not. I mean, anybody who came through there, they would just ask for their license and sticker, and they didn't have it, they would tow their car off and all that. What's not? I get the safety stops. I understand that, but what kind of stop was that? You're not doing it any longer, right?
That was correct. That was a roadside safety check. That was also done with grants, and it was usually in conjunction with holidays. And I will get this committee the last one we did as a department, but it's been quite a few years since we've done specifically a roadside safety check. We still have the seatbelt checks that we've done. We've limited those even, I think, because of COVID over the last couple of years. But yeah, as to your point about 2019 over on McClure, absolutely. I'm sure we were there because we were still doing seatbelt checks.
Yeah, because I didn't think they stopped me on that one. You're right. They would get every 5, every 6 car. You're right, I guess. However, the one on Dundee, and that was more than just a safety check, or they would stop everybody. They would have everything out there, and they would stop anybody who came through there. They would stop them, and they would ask them to see their license and their registration and insurance. 3 things they would ask them for. If they did not have all 3, then they would, they would tow their car.
Okay.
And that was done. Now, last time I was stopped there after Bible class, myself, and there's another Latino X Bible class. We all was stopped because we all got out about the same time. We all was stopped by 2014, 2015. That's the last time I remember, maybe 2016. But I just know that it was a great impact, and some of those people's cars was, pulled and towed and it was not too good. And most of those people of color.
Yes, sir. I don't know if I can find information from 24 to 16. I'm going to do my best to see if we have anything through our traffic division for anything. Can you specifically tell me the intersection that we're talking about? You said Dundee and what?
Yeah, Dundee and Summit, right there in the CVS. They would pull us all in the CVS lot, and they would check anybody. They had the dolly set up, and anybody that would come there, come through that way, they would have to come through that check. And they would do it about from 9 to I guess about 11. They would do it about that time.
Okay. I will look
Yeah.
into it.
Yeah. Thanks, Walter. Cynthia?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for being proactive, Deputy Chief Schulzler. You said you're being proactive with the stops and whatnot. I'd like to know what are some other grant requirements that you have that we may not be aware of? You said that some of these are tied into grant requirements. So if there's anything you could let us know for the next meeting that we're not aware of. And secondly, what are the percentages of complaints that come in that are from citizens or internal? If you can give us a breakdown, say over the last year or two, what has come in that's definitely from citizens, and then the internal complaints. And of the proven complaints, I think I asked this the last meeting, what was the resolution to those complaints? If we're able to know what some of the resolutions were for the complaints that have been founded. Thank you.
So I would have to take a look and give you the numbers. A lot of this is on our transparency page, but I would have to look as far as internal, external complaints. It's relatively, wow, it's your definition of low. We're, I think last year, the year before, we were 11 internal complaints. Was that last year? So, here we go.
14 external.
Yeah, 14 external, 11 internal, so 25. I'll verify all these numbers for you, and then I'll try to get some dispositions for you. I think some of the information has already been pulled together for some other committees that we're working on.
So,
And actually, if I could just interject, and I'm not sure who asked the question, was it Cynthia?
yes.
I think we had sent something out or mentioned at one of our previous subcommittee meetings that the chief was doing a really comprehensive report at the city at our last city council meeting, our committee of the whole meeting, and it was basically an overview of 2021, and it included, I think, exactly what you're looking for in terms of the number of complaints, how many of them are how many of them were internal versus external. And I want to say it even included the disposition of a lot of those complaints. So I would definitely recommend taking some time and going online and looking at that presentation, because she gave a whole lot of information, and it would be a shame to kind of lose it and have to try to go all over it again in this session.
I will, thank you. I just saw another presentation she made through another subcommittee, so I'll definitely go back and review. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yep, no problem.
I think that all sounds helpful. Task Force Member, I just want to clarify though, were you asking Deputy Chief for complaints related to profiling or racial discrimination, or were you asking just complaints?
Yeah, specifically with
Okay,
racial
all right.
profiling. Specifically that.
Got it. Okay, I just wanted to be clear about that. Okay.
Yeah, again, with the, I think Chief had been working on, I probably can break out that specific information for this subcommittee.
Great, thank you. We'll follow up with you in the time in between the meetings as well. So I wanted to step forward a little bit in our agenda here. I put up a slide here, a roadmap. What steps can Elgin Police Department take to reduce profiling? And the materials that we shared related to this, ask this guiding question for this subcommittee. The first was a study by the California Policy Institute, which I had actually shared with you all prior to the last meeting. We just didn't have time to go over it. It's a really huge study, and so was of interest, partially because of that, but also to just kind of look at the conclusions and key takeaways, and then one of the recommendations. Then the Department of Justice Community-Oriented Policing Services evaluation brief. This is a document from, I want to say, I think it's from 2009, but it is really rich with case studies about exactly what the kind of thing that this subcommittee and this task force is trying to do. These are places where funding from Department of Justice was provided to community, to local jurisdictions working in partnership with community in some way on a strategy that had an explicit goal of reducing racial profiling. And there's like 15 case studies in there. So I'm going to talk a little bit about those. And then also just highlight the language from the Chicago Consent Decree on Impartial Policing. This is just very general language, just to give you all some background on at least how, in a different context, folks are framing impartial policing in a policy way. So the Public Policy Institute of California study on racial disparities in law enforcement stops was huge. Study included 4 million stops from the 15 largest law enforcement agencies in California. It found significant disparities. It had the cover page over there for you all in case you, just so to orient you to which of the documents this is referring to. It found significant disparities in stops, likelihood of being searched, and extent to which searches yielded contraband, of course, with African Americans being the most out of in disparity in the study. Blacks are overrepresented in stops, of course, but also in stops not leading to an enforcement outcome. And this is just something that I'm finding, we're seeing a little bit of that in maybe in the data from DOT, but it's just really interesting to me. I don't know what it means. I'm just sort of pointing that out as one of the key findings here. And then Councilmember Powell, one of the recommendations that was highlighted at 2 different points at the end of this study is that law enforcement might examine whether traffic stops, and this part's a quote, in the particular can be reduced without leading to any negative impact on public safety. And basically the argument is, if these stops are where people are interacting mostly with police, and that is a disparate interaction in a lot of ways. And then there's also a lot of other data about the context and what happens in searches and the extent of what the reason was for the initial stop as to whether the officer saw something in the vehicle or not, or other reasons to be suspicious. So I just wanted to point that out. And Councilmember Powell, you made reference to the Philadelphia ordinance or policy around banning minor infractions as a reason for traffic stops. So that's sort of where I was going with the interest on this document. Go ahead, Task Force Member Rivera. Excuse me.
Thank you, Joe. I have a question. Are there any other measurement tools in place other than traffic stops that have police interaction that generated a complaint? I know we're focusing more so on traffic stops, but whether it's a domestic call or any other, if there's another tool that's measured with those type of incidents. And also there's no one here for public comment. I just wanted to make sure and mention that.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to do that.
That's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What we're seeing, at least in the things that I've shared so far, is a focus on studies where that folks are studying the data that's available. So in cases where the jurisdictions are required to share this data, then it's being reported on or studied. But I agree with you, there could be other factors and other things to look at. I haven't pulled things looking specifically for different kinds of data, I can. If there's a specific thing you want me to look into, and I'll invite Deputy Chief to comment or others as well on this.
I guess it would depend on the type of call or the types of complaints that would come in.
Yeah, and I think it's that deeper dive into our internal and external complaints from citizens, and it's not always centered around traffic stops. We'll get complaints from calls for service, rudeness. We'll get complaints from a number of different things, and I do think, again, I don't want to speak for the chief, but I'm pretty sure she was looking into all that and providing a pretty comprehensive review of that for one of the other committees. So I'm happy to share her findings and or what other information may be requested.
So I would invite you all to have a look at this study. It's the biggest one that we were able to find. Of course, it's California, but it's looking at 15 largest law enforcement agencies. So I got to imagine there's some in there that are similar in population size to Elgin. Okay. And then the COPS evaluation brief. And as I mentioned, this resource, Task Force Member Blaylock, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand.
Okay, good. You go into it. No, I think that was one of the best approaches I've seen. I did read a little bit about the California, but the COP, go ahead. You go into it. I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
Go right ahead. I'm sorry. Go right
sure.
ahead.
No, this one includes an overview of programs that took different approaches. The approaches fell into different categories. Accountability. Well, I should say the programs took different focuses. Some focused on accountability, some focused on recruitment and hiring, others focused on data and how they're using technology. For some, it was all about how they engaged the community. That was the central focus of their effort to reduce profiling. And training, of course, was in there. So, as I mentioned, there's just this is just a fantastic resource. A lot of great local examples here. I want to draw people's attention. Of course, this is through my lens, my own biases, but I would like for you all to look at it as well. The Buffalo, New York case study, which I believe used, I was really impressed that many of these use dialogue methodologies, known deliberative dialogue methodologies, which is part of my firm, my center focuses on and studies as part of their strategy. So they had study circles in Buffalo where every week for 4 to 6 weeks, groups of people were coming together and having conversations around something related to policing and racial profiling. And I want to also acknowledge that we had a great conversation last time about what happens when you bring people together in small groups to talk, and folks are comfortable and feel free to talk. You get that more honest dialogue that really tends not to happen in situations where people feel confronted or they're bringing emotion into the conversation. So that's the Buffalo example. Brookline, Massachusetts was interesting in that they use simulations and scenario-based training in partnership with a community organization or a outside organization that helps design specifically racial and cultural based trainings like that. Um, in Metro Nashville, really was impressed with the community engagement side. They established a steering committee. I feel like we kind of have a steering committee with the task force, but they established a steering committee. They guided the strategy, and there was a co-training. Both a training was led by both an officer or supervisor and a community person, both of whom had been trained by the same trainers. So they each had the same training, and they're each bringing the training from their perspective. I thought that was really, really fascinating. And then in Phoenix, Arizona, again, another dialogue-based approach that included really this interesting mix of internal police conversations together with community conversations. And I thought, that struck me as interesting, again, going back to what we talked about last time about just contexts in which officers are comfortable sharing honestly on this issue, right? And sometimes that might happen internally. So there was an internal assessment of for the department, and then they did these knowledge cafes internally as well, where officers and supervisors together, recognizing the different perspectives. And then that was flipped, and they had a community side to it. And there were youth and community forums, and they also used the study circles method, where you had an extended conversation happening on an ongoing basis on a specific topic. So really, if you read nothing else, please read this report because I think you're going to get some ideas.
And you're right. I did. I got a lot of ideas. And I think that one of the things that I'm looking at, because some of these things was ongoing, Joe, and I think that, it would be helpful, if in fact, I don't know if that would be the civilian review board, if they want to take approach, or some committee take approach that is proactive instead of negative on both sides, with this, promoting this with the community and officers and accountability and all that. I think that it will promote and foster good policing and good community relations with the community too. And also the police can tell the community what they're looking for. And that most of them just want to get home safely, and we want them to get home safely. I think that one thing that a lot of people don't understand, that we're not upset with police getting the criminal, whether they black, white, blue, green, yellow, or whatever. We want them to get the criminal, because many times the criminals, specifically in urban areas, are criminal. We are the victim of those black criminals. However, the point is we don't see that. We don't see them catching these criminals. We just see them dealing with innocent people who really ain't a harm to us nor the community. So and I think that needs to be talked about. So yeah, I like a lot of these models that we surely can use here in Elgin. And I think even the police department would appreciate it, because we're not coming at them in a negative light, but a very positive light, helping them to understand community and us to understand them and their job that they have to do, and for their safety. So there's a lot of things can be done. Like I said, I don't know, because it needs to be a continuation of it, not just with this task force, but something that, and I think that after I saw Chief Sabota setting up these type of intervention with the community, I see Chief Lally doing the same thing. So, but it need to be something put in formally where we can have talking to one another and constantly talking to the community of color and people of non-color, just all together, come together. It would help have this dialogue, and it would make better for police. And so yeah, I like these models. Just to say, I read them and it's pretty good.
Thanks, Task Force Member. I wanted to follow up too, your suggestion, your recommendation that it was key to formalize them and to institutionalize them. What the context for this report is, this is an evaluation. Well, it's highlights from multiple evaluations of all of these programs that were done. But why were they being evaluated? Because they received money from the Department of Justice to do that. And so that was one thing that struck me in the moment. I'm like, while I'm, kind of really getting fascinated by the cases that I was reading, I had to be reminded that each one of them had funding from this federal pot of money in order to do this, which is, a big question for a lot of these kinds of initiatives. And then second, how does that money sustain? How does that resource sustain if the grant ends? Is it something that, the local jurisdictions or the state can pick up?
Joe, if I may real quick, I think it's important that this committee have an understanding of what we're currently doing to the question on the agenda. What can EPD do to reduce and eliminate racial profiling? And as I'm looking at your slide here, includes overviews of programs that include things. A lot of these things I can point to initiatives that we're in the process of, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time, but I'm happy to take a deeper dive into a lot of these things and kind of parallel what's on the slide with some of the stuff that we're actually doing right now. So if you want, I can do it now. If you want me to set something up for the next meeting, I'd be happy to do that too.
I think, we may have some time now for you to talk about it. But what I would want to do is check with the subcommittee members first. Part of what we were going to do with the time that remains is a bit of brainstorming, a bit of ideation, but also question asking, as we always do. What information, you all are not shy about asking that, but what information would you all need to further guide and support you on developing these recommendations? So Deputy Chief Schuessler, you might be answering that information question with your presentation. I don't know. I'm posing that to the task force members. Would you all be interested?
Yeah, may I speak on that? I think that I asked the question. If Deputy Chief Schuessler can tell us how long these programs been in effect and what, why did they come about? If he can do that, and it would help us. I think I asked the question: Do they know that these problems exist, and how long they've known, and what are they doing about it? So yeah, I would like to hear that. If as me being a committee member, I can't speak for everybody. I don't know how the other committee members feel, but I would love for him to, because I see some of the things that we asked. If he can deal with some of those things now, it'd be great.
I see another thumbs up. I can't see everybody's hands screens at once, but I will say one other thing I wanted to point out. We have other subcommittees under which some of these topics fall. So in your discussion, Deputy Chief, I'd just like to say, for the purpose of this committee, if there's whatever it is that's being done that might relate to reducing racial profiling specifically, if you could highlight that as you're talking.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll high level this. I'll keep it quick. And then if there's questions that come after this, then I'd happy to take a deeper dive in the next meeting. But we take a three-pronged approach to this, and that's policy, training, and culture. When we talk about policy, the policies that you got today, our rules and regulations, even the city manual affects how we conduct ourselves. From a training standpoint, Mr. Blaylark's point, in 2017, we began fair and impartial training at the police department. That was just refreshed again in 2021. Our chief is one of the instructors in that. And it's fair and impartial policing training is a modern science of bias and decision making. It educates the participants on the impact of implicit bias on their perceptions and gives them the skills they need to reduce and manage bias that they may have. So that's one thing that we've been doing for 4 years, which we just kind of refreshed. Another thing that we started in 2020 was emotional intelligence for police officers. So utilizing emotional intelligence is one of the key elements for success for officers. It can make a difference in the results in their decision making, their stress tolerance, impulse control, and that applies to not just the frontline officers, but also the supervisors. So those are a couple of things there. When we talk about culture, internally, we have our culture of honor that was highlighted in our police report that the chief just put out. That was initiated by our special community outreach specialist, Bob Witt, and Detective Dan Rouse. And it's a program that brings officers, civilians, people within the department together to focus on core values that make all people similar and experiences that might make us unique or things that have shaped the who and how and why we are. And I can get deeper into that, but I told you I'd be quick here. So also along the lines of culture, to Pastor Blalick's comments, officers voluntarily engaged with clergy and a community activist group to discuss the book White Fragility. That was an ongoing program that took us about, I want to say, close to 6 months to get through, that culminated in some really interesting discussions, some hard, open heart discussions with community members. Members of the department engaged in the 21-day equity challenge. It was voluntary, but we had several officers who were engaged in the 21-day equity challenge, which allowed people to take a look at different perceptions, different ideas, different views of things that we may have a belief on, but then we take a look at it through the lens of someone else and get a new perspective. And then we did do study circles. Dr. Gaddis with his wife, Kathy Gaddis, had study circles that we did. They were broken down into 5-week sessions where we met virtually weekly, and we talked about racial profiling. We talked about race issues. We talked about policing, and not just limited to that, but we talked about environmental things. And then I see accountability on this slide. And one of the things that we're in the beginning stages of looking at is active bystandership for law enforcement through Georgetown Law. And essentially what this is a program that they've created, and it prepares officers to successfully intervene to prevent harm and create a law enforcement culture that supports peer intervention. So basically stopping officers from doing things that we know are recognized are wrong. So we're in the infancy of looking into that, but one of the things we continue to do as an organization is look for the best practices in addressing and eliminating racial profiling. So at high level, and I can dig deeper into anything for you guys.
Oh, that's great. Really appreciate that. Invite task force members to follow up with questions.
Yes, I'd like to know, how do they pick people? Like I said, clergy here. How do y'all do that? I just wondered, and I'm not trying to be, to kind of be picky, but it seems to me that when y'all have these discussions, y'all go get the lightest people. Y'all don't get people who's really engaged in the community. You get people who, let me give an example. You may get people who, I remember the last time they had Pastor Edmund. Well, Pastor Edmund don't live in the community. Second Baptist, many people in Second Baptist don't live in the community. I don't understand this, that you all get people who are, especially to my clergy, and I'm really insulted that I don't know about a lot of these things. And I've been involved with the police department ever since I left as being the human relations director. It seems to me that you all don't want people who going to tell y'all what the community thinks and somebody who got their ears to the community. And it's just insulting to me that a lot of these things I don't know about, but yet when there's a crisis, here I hear people coming to me and, I have to deal with these crises, but I can't deal with being proactive. And it's just really insulting. It's just a comment.
Thank you, Walter. Chair Krigler, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I definitely have to second that as well, in regarding to whom they're actually speaking with. And I think that's one of the reasons why, well, I know why a lot of African Americans do not participate in these conversations, because of the fact that it's always others that are brought in from the outside and not from their direct community or even those direct circles that are actually being adverse, or being affected. So, there's even community leaders that they are not reaching out to. And those community leaders are a lot of times involved, I know for a fact, with different conversations or actual situations that are happening with the police officers or with the police departments, and persons or a group of people. And they're not bringing in those people either. That was one of the reasons why I definitely on the civilian board was against putting a person, religious person, on that particular board, because I don't think we need to be hearing from the people who this is affecting. That's where the change needs to be made. And only they know how this has affected them, and I haven't said much because I'm sitting here and I'm listening to even watching the numbers that were presented. And all you have to do is go down to the courthouse and you see the majority of bodies down there are Black. It's not even a matter of persons of color. It's a matter of Black, period. So with that being said, we need to have those people at the table, Black ministers that are taking and working with these groups or with people, just like I said, going along to get along, it's not working anymore. It's just not. So that's my thought.
And to both your points, I don't disagree. And Pastor Blaylark's point, we weren't looking for voices that were just going to say, hey, great job, and not challenge us. And this was also something that formed organically and kind of took a life of its own. But we saw the benefits and the ability for officers to engage and look at things through a different lens and read a book that might have been challenging to them, but then have tough conversations. And this is something, to your point, this is early in its infancy, and we weren't trying to exclude anyone. And when we did look for clergy and community activists, we were looking for leaders and groups that had larger voices within their groups. And we're happy to have these greater conversations and be more inclusive. That's not something I think we shy away from. But it was never meant as a disrespectful thing to have these original conversations about a book, White Fragility, and the challenges and the things that we were working on internally. We want to see these things grow. We do want to have that interaction. I think one of the things I'm under the impression is going to happen is we're going to have some officers at some point have an opportunity to meet some people and have committee members kind of get to know who officers are actually. So we're looking forward to that. And again, it's not a slight. It's just something that kind of formed organically through the course of everything our country's been going through. And you're right, it should be pushed out, and there should be more voices and more people, especially the people who are affected the greatest with this conversation.
Well, first of all, let me say that I like what you all are doing. I'm just saying, not even these people that y'all say clergy, I ain't heard nothing about this. And I meet with clergy. It's just a shame that people don't, if you all are doing something good, you need people who's going to talk about that. When a group of guys come to me who not members of my church, who are out on the street and they're talking about, hey, the police is doing this, doing that to me, I can tell them, hey, wait, hold on, here's some of the things the police is doing. Let's go out and talk with them. Let's go and talk with, Deputy Chief Schuler. Let's go and talk with him. You seem to be a guy who's open. Let's go talk with him. Come on, let's go down and talk. That's all I'm saying. And I don't know if they're doing that. I hope they are. I don't believe they are, because people would quit coming to me and they would be going to them if in fact they was if they was preaching, what you guys are doing. They're not doing that. And I don't see people in the community doing that, and they should be doing that. And I'm not saying that I know everybody, but I don't know most of the people. And I know both those agitators and those who are not agitators. I know everybody, who have some right with the police, and also who say the police doing a good job. However, that message needs to be getting out. So these are things that, you guys are doing, starting in 2017, and I hope we continue to do those. If I'm not involved, but make sure that people in the community involved that will get out and tell the message to those in the community.
I hear you, sir. I appreciate what you're saying.
At this point, I'd like to invite anyone who hasn't had a chance to comment yet or share the comment, just welcome you all to anyone who hasn't yet raise a question or comment. All right, if not, I see Councilmember Powell has her hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. This is a question for Deputy Chief Schuessler in response to Pastor Blaylark's comment, and Pastor Blaylark knows that I have him on speed dial, so definitely no slight in terms of wanting him to be involved, and so many others that I know in the community. I'm not sure when the police department put together some of these, like the study group that you had with reading White Fragility. Was that something that was done in conjunction with Searle?
It was done in conjunction with our clergy group that we had in, and it kind of formed, it was kind of organic. We were sharing some of our reading lists. If everyone, a lot of people know Larry Henderson. We were talking about some reading materials, and then Deputy Chief Colin Fleury was mentioning a book, and then Larry recommended White Fragility, so we got it. We read it as an admin. We took some notes. We found a lot of stuff interesting, some stuff challenging, and we said, this is good. This made us think, and this is something that if people are willing to look at, then let's take a dive in with some officers and maybe open some eyes, open some minds. So again, when I say it formed organically, it was like, there wasn't a like, hey, today we're going to talk about what book club we're going to start. It was something where it was two friends talking, and it morphed into this greater discussion that ultimately involved probably 25, 30 people, officers and sergeants and lieutenants throughout the department, meeting at one of the local churches and sitting in these circles and discussing their thoughts, their experiences, their views on the book, what they believed, what they needed some greater discussion on. Larry was great. He put together a wonderful PowerPoint, kind of went into some of the greater details in the book. So I think there was a huge benefit to it. And I think those types of conversations, whether it's that book or something else, to Pastor Blaylark's point, need to be happening at a greater scale within the community.
So in addition to Pastor Larry Henderson that you mentioned, how many other clergy were a part of that? I know that he's an African-American clergy member. Can you recall who else was involved with your group?
Yeah, at the time before Reggie moved off to one of the Carolinas, he was involved in it. Margaret, she was part of it from the synagogue.
Margaret Pritchard.
Yeah, and then we had Mark. I know everybody by first name. I'm struggling right now with last names, but we had about 5 or 6 clergy that were in the initial conversation. And then obviously, do I want to put somebody out on this committee who ended up becoming involved and had some pretty good conversations with us?
Yes,
Corey
yes.
Battle.
Mm-hmm.
Corey Battles was there. And,
yeah, I came in on the end, so it's Mark. You said Margaret, Larry Henderson,
Reggie Key.
Reggie moved on. Yes, I came in, I think after Reggie left, I came in for a while, sat in on a couple of, yeah.
So I think Pastor Blaylock is volunteering to host or work with you all on one in the future. Is that what I'm hearing, Pastor?
No, I'm not. I'm just saying that, you know, to be very, very honest with you, you know, when you have these groups, you know, obviously I'm not a part of their clergy group, and I'm too busy right now. However, you know, we could, you know, and they've done that before, not just only him. Sabota, he had some clergy groups too. And they you know, discriminately, you know, left me out. So that's a MO that people are doing here in Elgin. That's okay. Only thing I'm saying is when trouble, I'm always a crisis manager. None of these other guys show up when there's a crisis. And so when that crisis happen, you know, don't ask me either. Don't ask me to keep peace, you know, because I'm very insulted. So fine. No, I'm not asking to volunteer for nothing. I'm too busy right now. I'm really busy on this group, and you know, I'm trying to stay in this. So no, thank you.
Pastor Blaylock, I appreciate your candor, and hopefully, you know, we can, you know, Elgin Police Department can turn things around on that in terms of its relationship with you. We're approaching 7:30. I realize I had assumed we had 90 minutes. I know the agenda might have said an hour. I thought we had already agreed that we would need 90 minutes for our subcommittee meetings. So I failed to do a time check with you all, but we definitely need the time. I'm glad we went this long. I think there was one more reading that I had included, and Deputy Chief Schuessler, maybe next time we can pick up as to the relevance of it. But I think it's probably interesting for all of the subcommittees. It's was an article on the debate around the warrior versus guardian mentality in policing. And you know, I was thinking about the extent to which that might affect racial profiling. And so I had shared that. I knew we wouldn't have time to get into that. Wanted to stay focused on the readings that had really direct like models for us to possibly draw from. I'm really trying to help us stay focused on generating ideas for recommendations. I know there's a lot of stuff we can talk about, but through the middle of the threads of our conversation, I'm going to try to keep us on, you know, at the end of all of this, we got to come up with something to suggest. And it could be one big thing, it could be a lot of little things, but there's a lot of ideas that we're going to have to sort of discuss and flush out. So I see some hands up still. Are they old hands or are new comments from folks?
Well, Joe, I just wanted to thank, you know, Chief, the Deputy Chief. I don't want to, you know, like I'm a hater. You know, I'm glad you all are doing that. I appreciate it. And I want to apologize to you too, Joe. I'm not trying to get us off. But, you know, it's really good that you're doing it. I hope you all continue to do that. Whoever is involved, you know, we need more of that. And thank you all. Thank you for answering. I basically initially asked that question last week. So that is good. I'm glad that is started 2017 and 2020. So I'm thumbs up, man. I appreciate that, and tell Chief the same thing. I appreciate it. Let's keep that up. God bless.
In fact, some of those things are of the nature of the kinds of things that we're seeing in these models, in this COPS reading in particular. So what I would like to, as we're at 7:31, I really want to move to wrap up the meeting here, but also get us a little bit primed for our next meeting. I'm going to be continuing to research and get hands-on resources and things you all have asked for. Councilman Powell will have the article that you shared about Philadelphia's policy shared with everybody, and anything else that was requested. But I would also like to ask everyone to be coming to our next meeting with ideas about recommendations. I talked a lot today, talked a lot about the readings. I would like us next time to use more of the time talking about ideas and maybe in a dialogue with Deputy Chief Schusler about those ideas as well. So I'll in the time between this and the next meeting, you'll get the minutes and all of that. But I would like to give you all some what I just asked for in written form, instructions for you all to be thinking about before the next meeting, which will be in 2 weeks on the schedule that we're currently on. Okay, does that leave anyone with any questions about our next steps? Oh, Pastor Blaylock, yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I hate to keep on talking, but I know one thing that you did say, and I did keep on saying that too, in the COPS evaluation was the grant. I think that would be one of my suggestions is to see can we get grants from the Department of Justice dealing with racial profiling and how we can reduce, eliminate it, or have study groups or some of the things that those other cities did. So sure, that's a great, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I kept on seeing that and I wanted to talk about the grants on that for the Department of Justice or whatever grant.
Sure. We'll add that to our research that we do, funding sources. There's always that trade-off though. What happens when the money goes away, right? And so, what we heard from Deputy Chief today are things they're doing. I don't know how many of those things were funded by external grants or whatever, but part of what I would strongly recommend goes into our recommendations is thinking about the sustainability of whatever it is we recommend. Can it be institutionalized? Maybe you get the money to do the big thing up front, but as far as the ongoing part of it, you need a commitment. You need a commitment from the city or the police department or somewhere to keep it going, right? So that should be just as much a part of the conversation as the external funding. But we'll do research on that. Thank you, Pastor. So at this point, it's 7:35. Barring any other comments or questions, I would like to close the meeting and bring the meeting to a close. Do I hear any objections? Okay, all right. This meeting is adjourned. And thank you all and everyone also watching us on the live stream. And an extra special thanks to Task Force Member Rivera, who's there live in person. We will be continuing to request a volunteer to be in person in City Hall, as that's what enables these meetings to happen. So
well, what is the next date, Joe? What is the next? I do the next time.
Sorry, I don't have my calendar up.
I don't have your calendar.
Hold on.
Are we doing on Monday again? Are we on Monday?
Yes, we will be. I'm sorry. We will be meeting at this time 2 weeks from now, which will be February 7th.
February 7th. Okay, I will. If you remind me,
Yeah.
I would go down if you please remind me.
I'll get my my request for a volunteer out earlier this time.
Okay,
too.
yeah, and I can go down. I would do it.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody, and that's it. Good night.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, you all.
Good night.
We're still live on YouTube, Sheila. I see us there. I think I can stop. I stopped the recording, but I don't think I can control the streaming. So we're going to have to get off this call if we want to chat, but you're on mute. So
we'll end the meeting. We'll talk tomorrow.
Talk tomorrow. Okay.